being in a toxic, stressful environment can lead to autoimmune disorders, and that can certainly affect your health. And when it comes to being rejected, it does open up the same and activate the same neural pathways as physical pain. So you do feel something. You are experiencing something that is very difficult and very hard to manage. Staying in these negative, toxic relationships where you're constantly filled with anxiety and fear has a detrimental effect as well on our mental health. And that is something that we need to address right away. And especially with our young girls. I mean, I see so many teenage girls and they're suffering so badly. And the only way is to help them become stronger in terms of rejecting being around those types of people. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it's necessary.
When we talk about stress in motherhood, we often focus on sleep deprivation, work-life balance, or parenting pressure. But there's another source of stress that many women quietly carry: toxic friendships. My next guest has spent years researching the emotional dynamics of adult female relationships and the impact that they can have on well-being.
I talked to a woman whose daughter was just had a complete breakdown. She was at a party with 15 girlfriends, and then all of a sudden she realized they all left her, and she was just crying and so upset. And I was like, oh, well, those clearly aren't her friends. And then I talked to the mother a few days later, and I was like, how's she doing? And she's like, oh, it's fine. You know what? Her closest friends in the group were like, oh, we hopped in an Uber and we forgot to text you, so everything's good. I was like, no.
Yeah.
It's not good. And you need to tell her what friendship looks like. Friends don't just leave you, right? There has to have been one or two people to stay behind. It's actually, research shows that the magic number is 2 friends.
Ericka Suter is a journalist and an author who explores the intersection of friendship, identity, and motherhood. Today, we're talking about why social rejection can feel so painful, how toxic friendship dynamics develop, and how women can begin protecting their emotional well-being. Let's welcome Ericka Suter to the show. Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Taz. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to pause and say thank you. Your messages, your shares, your stories are the reason we make Whole Plus. Every conversation here is about connecting the science, the intuition, and everyday life together so you can feel more like yourself again. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe or follow button. It helps us reach more people who need this. All right, let's begin. Ericka, I'm so glad you're here today because over and over again, we talk about women needing to be in a village and needing to be in a community. It's hard to raise children on your own. But you can be in a toxic village and you can be in what we sometimes will call a toxic mom group. You have written about this. You have researched this. I think the question that I personally have, because I have sat with this for many different fronts, whether it's raising children, whether it's being in the professional environment, whether it's our political system, right, or our leadership system, why do women almost kind of turn against each other?
Well, I think one of the most surprising things that I've found from the polls that I do across the country and interviewing hundreds of women is that we have normalized these toxic relationships. And I found that there are 3 reasons why women don't reject them or walk away. One is proximity, right? So you have a kid and it's the most vulnerable part of adulthood for a lot of women. And, I liken it to your whole identity is like shaken up like a snow globe. So that means belonging becomes that much more important, right? And so who are you around? You're around other new mothers, you're around at your kid's school or preschool or in the park. And so those relationships and that belonging become so important. And then the next thing is that we are socialized not to, shake things up, not to be rude, not to reject other people. Most of us are socialized that way. And so we don't want to rock the boat. So we kind of don't say anything when we see something amiss because we want to kind of stay in the fold. We want to stay a part of the group. We don't want to be rejected ourselves. And then the other part of it is that, if we blow up our social group or
Right.
if we reject these friends, then there is collateral damage in our lives, right? We don't have those people to turn to, and we don't have those people to go to coffee with or brunch with or invite to birthday parties or be a part of a mom group. So all of those things, I think, contribute to why women just don't say anything, even when deep down they know friendships or friend groups are not good for them.
Do you feel like this is an issue just as women become mothers, or is there sort of just this underlying, female issue where we will do these very same behaviors with or without children? You know what I mean? We may be doing them when we're in a college setting. We might be doing them in a professional setting. We might be doing them with friends we have that, have nothing to do with having kids or nothing to do with having a family. Is this something about the way we are wired? And then my follow-up question to that is, if we are wired this way, what specifically does motherhood, the act of having a child and having that responsibility, what does that do to this maybe biology or physiology that we might be carrying innately?
Right. Well, I'll say this first.
Okay.
Motherhood doesn't create toxic female relationships or toxic mom friends. It just gives you like a new environment or platform, right? Because what I've seen is that girls, young women and girls can be toxic throughout their lives.
Right.
I've seen situations where, I'll call them case studies, where 3-year-olds are mistreating each other.
Ugh.
And I have boys, and my boys were not capable of the kind of sophisticated cruelty that I saw these girls exhibit. And of course, and when you're little, it's kind of like, you're not pretty, we don't want to play with you, we don't like you can't be our friend. And those things sting.
Yeah.
And rejection, no matter at what age, neuroscience has shown that it activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. So it really does hurt, right? And so I think that it can start as early as 3, and it can continue throughout our lives. And there are evolutionary psychologists who believe that it's from the days when, we needed to outshine other women to find someone to protect us and to take care of us. So you have to kind of outshine your competitor. And so there is an argument that maybe that's some kind of genetic reason, or it's somehow embedded in our DNA that we need to survive, and to survive you have to be at the top of the pyramid.
Right.
But I think that it's just we haven't done the work to eradicate this behavior. And the reason is, and I've interviewed as many mean girls as I have targets and victims, there is no penalty
For being a mean girl.
for being a mean girl. There's no reason to stop, because there is no penalty. So I'm advocating for there to be a penalty. But in order for there to be a penalty, you need what I call the disruptors to step forward,
Right.
and put up boundaries, reject the behavior, and stand up for being kinder. I'm not saying women have to be nice all the time,
Right.
but you don't have to accept that small group, one person or a small group of women are going to dictate how you treat every other woman in your life.
I've been on an unfortunate front row to much of this, and much of it through my daughter's experience, who's now 18 years old, and have sort of witnessed how this has played out in her school friends and in her, and who she's been around over the years, and what that's done to me personally in terms of who that puts me around at the same time, right? I think the first thing that I would want my listeners and viewers to understand is, how do you even recognize that you're in a toxic group to begin with, right? So many of us, myself included, with everything that I know, we are so much, once you become a mom, it is so much about your child, right? So much of us are just like, okay, anything to make you okay and mentally healthy and happy and emotionally safe. What do I need to do? Do I need to go enter this group? Do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? That was a lot of what was in my mind as I've gone through the years. And trust me, I've tried. And it's, how does someone know that they have entered maybe a group or a dynamic that really isn't good for them or for their child?
Right.
How do you know?
Well, let me say this first. The stakes are higher after you have kids, because you're not just asking, will they accept me? It's, will they accept my kid? Will my kid have play dates? Will she be socialized?
Right.
Will she feel happy and have fun and feel a part of something?
Yes.
So when you're a mom and you're watching this, and then you're also thinking about it for yourself as well, it just raises the stakes, and it makes belonging that much more important in your life, right? So I think one of the first things that, and I think it starts with the mom, right? Because kids, young girls, they don't learn about friendship from what we tell them. They learn by what we show them. So if they see you kind of accepting nasty behavior or merciless gossiping or exclusion, they're going to mirror that. And they may not, say, oh, I'm going to mirror that. They're not saying that, but they're taking it in and they're seeing that that's okay.
Such sponges.
Such sponges. Yeah. But they're not just seeing it from, it's not just the, we'll call it the queen bee or mean girl that sets the tone. It's all the women in between. Right. So we have what we call the flying monkeys who are, a part of this, mean girl clique or mean mom clique who kind of keep the rules going. Right, who kind of like the second in command to the mean girl, and then you have like the emotional arsonist who kind of fans the flame of the gossip and the issues, right? But then you have people underneath that, which I call the stabilizers, who. So that first group was the amplifiers. The second group is the stabilizers.
So wait, so you have the flying monkey.
Well, so the flying monkey, the let's say the queen bee, the flying monkey, the emotional arsonist. Those are all the amplifiers, right? Okay. They keep that whole culture going. And then you have the stabilizers who, this would be like the silent person, the person who maybe wants to, a bit of social climber, who doesn't want to say anything, doesn't want to rock the boat because they want to be a part of the group. But then to change this, you need the disruptors. And these are the women who set boundaries, who call out bad behavior, and who aren't fearful of the consequences. Now, that's a hard position to be in.
Very much, yeah.
Very hard.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes a lot of experience and a lot of hurt to get to the point where you're going to call it out. Something that I've done. I have lived that, and I became what I think is a disruptor. And I called out bad behavior, and I lost friends because of it. But I was at a stage in my life where I was like, I didn't want to feel this endless competition and comparison. I didn't want to leave a meeting with people feeling
not
less than or not great. And I didn't want to put other people down to make myself feel good. And it really does take a mom or a woman asking herself these questions and taking a look at how she feels when she's with these people. And is that worth it? And also understanding your self-worth. Like, I came to the point where I'm like, you know what? I'm a pretty nice person. I'm a fun person. I'll have friends. I'll make friends. But I know it's hard to get to that point. But I want more women to realize that they're going to find kinship with people who are less toxic. But it really starts with asking yourself, how do you feel when you're with these people? And then to ask your daughter the same thing.
It's so hard. I mean, I hope people are listening and sharing this, because I think when I entered motherhood, first of all, if we back up to female friendships in general, I've had the most amazing women in my life, right? I adore them and love them, but we've had commonality in terms of intellectual compatibility, career, maybe goals or ambition or things like that, character and morals and values. There's been some commonality there. I think when you become a mother, I've been on a journey of being stretched, right? Yeah. Which is a spiritual journey, I think, that we all go on as mothers. And we start to dip our toe into environments where maybe all those things don't necessarily exist altogether. It doesn't mean that anybody is less than or not enough or things like that. It just means we're stretching, and we're stretching into new territory. The health part of this equation, though, is it's like when we enter this new dimension, and you're maybe that stabilizer or disruptor in a toxic mom group, is that really good for you to stay in that group? Yeah. Leaving constantly feeling like you're not enough, or feeling like, you're in a lower pecking order, in terms of who's within the group. What does a disruptor do? And how can one of the other three, the flying monkey, the queen bee, the emotional arsonist, how can we help them identify that this is their behavior?
Right. It has to be called out.
Ooh.
And that is so hard to do.
Drama.
Total drama.
Where's Showtime now?
Total
we need a show for this.
drama.
So
It has to be called out, and it takes an incredible amount of bravery to do that. But once you do that, and the women that I've talked to that have done that, they're happier on the other side.
right.
But it may take a little bit of pain in the process, because you're wondering, well, who's going to still be my friend? Who's going to, still hang out with me? And what you'll find is that there will be people who are going to align with you and want the same things. I found that for myself. And I think that, the amplifiers, the flying monkeys, the mean girls, the emotional arsonists, I have found that they are less likely to change because there hasn't been enough of a penalty, right? There's no consequence to the behavior because so many of us are afraid to say anything, or so many people just kind of like make excuses for them. Oh, well, she doesn't do that to me, or that's just her personality. I'm
Yeah.
like, no, it shouldn't be her personality. And if it is her personality, there should be a consequence. So they're not going to change. But when you have the stabilizers who are kind of going along for the ride, happy to be a part of the mix, they have to realize their own self-worth, right? And I do think that there's self-esteem issues, their belonging issues, and, every woman has gone through it,
Right.
But you have to get to the point where you realize that your value is greater than how you're being treated.
As a holistic practitioner, I believe the journey to motherhood starts long before that first positive test. It starts with nourishing your body's unique rhythm and understanding that fertility is a cellular process. While many focus solely on the calendar, the real driver of a healthy pregnancy is egg quality. Your eggs are the most energy demanding cells in your body, and that energy is fueled by mitochondrial health. Over time, factors like oxidative stress can drain that cellular energy, making your nutrient demands much higher today than they might have been in the past. This is exactly why a generic prenatal alone is often not enough to provide the targeted support your body is asking for. That's why I want to talk to you about U Natural's Conception for Her. What I love about this formula is its commitment to purity and cellular function. They use premium botanical extracts like Vitex and Shethberry, specifically chosen to support hormonal balance and a healthy cycle, alongside antioxidants that combat oxidative stress. U Natural also has thousands of success stories from women who felt overwhelmed by their fertility journey and finally found the support they needed. It's more than just a supplement. It's about giving your cells the fuel and your body the tools to do what it was meant to do. Take the first step today. Head over to unatural.com and use my special listener code TAS20 for 20% off your first order. How do we help women with this? How do we help them when they step into a group, right? And again, there's so many different ways to paint this, right? There are people that enter into social clubs, for example, and there's a purpose in being in that club, whatever the purpose may be.
Yeah.
And they are so excited to be a part of this club that they are afraid to call things out, or they are afraid to disrupt something that might have been around for hundreds of years and is an institution, right? And again, we can extract this to our world stage as well, right? But when you enter a group of moms, right, and for the first time, maybe it's a new school, maybe it's a new activity, and now you've been introduced to this new group, you moved into a new home.
Yeah.
Are there things that you can instantly, before you're in too deep, because again, I've been in this situation and it's taken me, to get older and over time to be like, it's taken me a while to understand that I walk in here and I don't feel good and I should not be here anymore. You know what I did 9 times out of 10? I would say it's me. The problem is me. I'm this, I'm too nerdy, I'm too in my head, I'm too cerebral, like they're just having a good time. I'd make all these excuses for them and blame myself. And I'm like, of course my daughter's going to have issues with this because her mom is like, so like, one foot in front of the other, that type of person. And so I spent a lot of years blaming myself. I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I had been like, this is not the group for us. These are not the friends for you.
Yeah.
You are me and I am you, and these are our values and morals. And yes, we are cerebral, and that's just one of the natures of how we're wired. How could I have prevented all those years of like I don't even know how to describe it. Just feeling like it's almost like you're trying to slide through doors that are closing. You know, how could I have been like, no, no, and no?
So I think one of the most basic things that we need to do as parents and, and as individual women who want connection is we have to diversify our social groups. We can't rely on one group. And I think doing that for our daughters is so significant. What I have found is when a mom or a family relies on just the kids in school or just the parents in school, when something goes wrong, then they're left out, they're isolated, they feel ostracized. But when you have a kid who does ballet and soccer and this and our church group, and there are lots of ways that she has connection, or even for a woman, and she has lots of points of connection that aren't in the same group, it gives you, it allows you to see the bad parts sooner, right?
Yeah.
Because you can see like, oh, I don't like the way I feel with the moms from the PTA, but I love when I'm hanging out with the soccer moms, or I love it when I hang out with my church group, or whatever it is, or my food co-op group.
Yeah.
And so I think that one of the basic things we can do for ourselves is diversify our friend groups, our social groups for our kids and ourselves.
Oh my gosh, that's such a great idea. It's such a great idea. But I'm going to push back on that for a second. Because as a mother, and for all the working mothers that are out there, right? One of the things that many of us have talked about is the load. We call it the invisible load.
Yeah.
This constant hum. There's always something to do. There's 50 things to organize. There are logistics. If you have one kid, it's a lot. If you have 3 kids, it's even more. I don't know how people do it when they passed, a couple of kids. So this idea of diversifying your social groups, I even in those years was like, this is what we need to do, But guess what? I had no time. I had no time to make those connections, to go out and go find a new set of people to connect with and be with and things like that. How do we navigate that as women that work and have careers, but we also want to be present for our children, and we want to make sure our children are emotionally taken care of? Is there a hack? Is there a hack for that to figure that part out sooner, faster, and more efficiently?
I think one of the problems that we have is we assume that connection are these big moments. Oh, we're going to do karaoke together. We're going to have we're meeting for breakfast or brunch. Connection happens on very small levels, and it's about the number of times you connect, not how long you spend together or exactly what you do. It could be texts every other day or once a week, or conversations every other Sunday, or meeting at, going to soccer practice on a Sunday afternoon, or meeting with your whatever activity it is, like if it's a church group or a sewing circle or what have you. I think the point is that it's consistency, but that doesn't necessarily mean frequency. It's hard for me to explain, but
it's connection.
It's connection, but connection doesn't have to be these big grand moments, and it builds over time. And I think a lot of times people think like, oh, I want to meet this group of women and we're going to have fun, we're going to connect, and we're going to be great. It takes a while to find your people.
Yeah.
For kids and adults. It's not going to be instantaneous in most cases. It's going to take a little bit of time and investment, but it doesn't mean it has to be hours at a time. It could be coffee every other week. It could be like a Zoom. There are lots of ways to build that connection and that relationship. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, because I am tired all the time.
Right.
But I try to make a point of doing these things once in a while. And one of the things that I started doing was, I don't have time. I read a lot of books for work.
Yeah.
I do a lot of research, and I read everything on parenting you can imagine. But, and people are in book clubs, I'm thinking, oh my God, I just don't have time to read a book for fun. But what I did was I started this club, not club, but this gathering called Bookish. And I send 10 friends the article, and I'm like, okay, we're going to get together for 2 hours once a month, and we're going to just discuss the issues in this article. And it's really just to
I love
hang
that.
out.
Yeah.
And the pressure's low.
Yeah.
Right? And people can usually read an article, or there's so many articles on audio right now. You can So, and everyone's excited, and everyone wants to come because they're also, yearning for that connection.
Yeah.
So, and this is the other thing, if you need it, you want it the way you're feeling, there are 100 other women who are feeling the exact same thing. You're not alone in that. And sometimes we have this idea of thinking I'm the only one who's not doing this, or I can't figure this out. Everyone around you is don't look at Instagram
Yeah.
and think that that's real life.
Oh, Instagram.
No.
It's a whole separate story. But one of the things I talk about from a health perspective over and over again, we talk a lot about the 5 bodies, right? I've talked about it before on this show. There's a physical body, there's a mental body, there's an emotional body, there's sort of like this energetic or spiritual body, which is your relationship, kind of with the universe or God. And then there's this community body, and it's a part of health, which is why this conversation is so important. I think that if we don't pay attention to the community that we are existing in and those relationships within that community, especially mom groups, which, by the way, drive usually the health of the whole family and the community of the family, right? Because the mom is usually driving, who her kids are going to be friends with, even who her husband's going to be friends with to a certain extent, right? I have one mom friend who's like, oh, I arrange play dates for my husband all the time, right? Because otherwise men will shut down and kind of do their own thing off in this universe. So, when we think of this in the health context, right, it's important to have this piece of your health as healthy as your lab values and your hormones and your inflammation markers and your mental health and all these other things that we talk about. But for many women, how much do you think, and I don't know if you've explored this in your research, I'm curious, like for women that are simply not healthy, they are tired, they are exhausted, they don't feel good about themselves, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional. How vulnerable are those women in particular to a toxic mom group?
Well, they're incredibly vulnerable because you're so desperate for connection, you're willing to put up with things that you normally wouldn't, or things that you kind of know deep down don't serve you. But, here's the one thing I have found about mothers is that, we will put everyone else's needs above our own. We'll ask, am I being a good employee? Am I being a good wife? Am I being a good mother? But we also need connection. And it's not that we need more friends. We need better friendships. And so you have to really ask yourself, does this friendship make me feel good? Does this friendship serve me? It doesn't have to be like, totally reciprocal. If someone takes you out to dinner, you don't always have to do tit for tat.
Right.
But there has to be some kind of emotional touchstone. Like this person, I'll give an example. So I have a really good friend, Anita. And sometimes I go through these periods where I'm so overwhelmed and I kind of drop out of sight for a couple of days. And
I do that too. Yeah.
And she'll be like, hey, what's going on with you? And she is that friend who she will reach out, just be like, hey, I just want to see what's going on with you. And sometimes we need that. We can be that for someone, and we need someone to be that for us. But it's not about these big splashy moments. It's about those little moments where someone cares about how you feel. You, not just your kids, not your husband, but they care about what you're going through. And I think that we need to have those people in our lives, but we also need to make the effort to be those people.
Do you feel like most women neglect this? Like finding people that care about them versus their child and who their child's going to play with and, their marriage and stuff like that. Do you feel like most women are not really great at this?
Yeah, I think most women neglect their needs. Absolutely. And that's not just my opinion. I have interviewed hundreds of women and that is what I have found. That's why I wrote this book, how to have a kid in a life. And it's not about go shopping, get a mani-pedi. Mani-pedis are not self-care to me at all. I think that what you have to do is you have to ask yourself questions about what you need to find out what is missing. Right? For some women, it's their romantic relationship isn't serving them, or it's their career isn't going in the right direction, or it's, their physical health. But you really have to sit down and ask yourself, and it could be in the shower, it could be in the bathtub, it could be driving to work, but you really have to evaluate what is missing in your life and then kind of work to fill that.
I'm curious. So, those of us that are vulnerable maybe to being in this toxic mom group dynamic or toxic friend group dynamic, are you also vulnerable to being in toxic romantic relationships and toxic partnerships? Is there an overlap there? I don't know if your research showed any of that or not. I'm just super curious.
Yeah, I haven't researched that specifically, but what I have found is that when women have toxic friendships, it can impact their home life. It can affect the way they are with their partners and their children. So when you have, and I've also seen that when people have chaotic and toxic work environments because they're bringing it home, and it impacts how they can sometimes speak or relate, or how they are when they're not at work. They're still thinking about it, they're still obsessing about it, and it still has this emotional impact on them. So I don't want to specifically address like whether you're more vulnerable to toxic romantic relationships, because I think that pathology is different.
Okay.
But I absolutely think having a toxic social group can impact your family life.
Well, one of the things, that I've seen too, and I mean, and, we've always, you observe it and then you move on, but, you'll see a mom group where one person goes and gets like a plastic surgery procedure, for example. The next thing you know, they're all getting that exact same procedure. Or you'll see another group where one person gets divorced, and the next thing you know, all of those people are getting divorced. What's happening in those scenarios of moms being together?
Well, I do think there is a tremendous amount of comparison that goes on. Motherhood was always hard.
Right.
But now it's hard and on display.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think there is a lot of, using that old phrase, keeping up with the Joneses. There's this idea that, I don't want to be the oldest looking one in the group. And if so-and-so's getting her eyes done, then maybe I should do it. And I've seen it with my own friends. Someone gets a lift or something. They're like, oh, should I do that? Or should I consider
all the
doing
time?
that?
Yeah.
And I think that there's some of that is normal because as we age, appearance, we have issues with like, oh my God, I'm getting wrinkles, I'm getting older. And that's hard for everyone.
Right.
So I do think that when your friend does it, kind of gives you permission. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing,
right?
Unless you take it to extremes. But kind of like when someone kind of breaks that seal and just starts it, it can start everyone thinking about it. But I do think there are more negative instances that I've seen where one person decides they hate someone in the group, and then everyone kind of falls in line and rejects that person or ostracizes that person. And it's so strange because, and I've seen it personally and I've seen it from interviewing people, and it's so strange to me. We're grown women and we kind of let someone else dictate who we can be friends with.
Yeah.
And then some of these women are, a lot of people ask me, oh, you must talk mostly to stay-at-home moms, or these must be like housewives or suburban wives who don't have anything to do. That's not true. It is everyone. I've interviewed everyone from CEOs to people who are like fashion designers, like all these people who have these big careers, and then in their personal life with their friends, they allow themselves to be mistreated. And sometimes it's really surprising. But again, it's this, there is an epidemic of loneliness. And sometimes we feel like we just need people, we need a group of women around us so that we aren't so lonely. But we're mistaking the numbers for, true connection. You can have a group of women around you and still feel lonely and dejected. And that's not what you want.
I'm curious what neuroscience says about a couple of things. What does the science say about women who stay in toxic friend groups, toxic mom groups? Is there any research around that in terms of, their stress levels, their levels of inflammation? I'm super curious. And then the other part is, let's say you are that disruptor and you are that person who's like, hey, wait a second, and you call something out and you get rejected. That fear of rejection is huge for anybody as a human, right? And we definitely see it, in our kids. What does social rejection do to the brain?
Well, I'll say this: there is research that suggests that being in a toxic, stressful environment can lead to autoimmune disorders, and that can certainly affect your health. And when it comes to being being rejected. Yeah, I mean, it's painful. Like it does open up the same and activate the same neural pathways as physical pain. So you do feel something. You are experiencing something that is very difficult and very hard to manage. But the long-term emotional effects for like depression and anxiety, we're at epidemic levels for women and girls, and I mean even young men. Even we see it with teens and boys. But staying in these negative, toxic relationships where you're constantly filled with anxiety and fear has a detrimental effect as well on our mental health. And that is something that we need to address right away. And especially with our young girls. I mean, I see so many teenage girls and they're suffering so badly. And even when you see someone, oh, they have friends and they're going out. but behind those closed doors and what their parents are dealing with them is a lot of depression and anxiety. And the only way I feel like one of the only ways to remedy that is to help them become stronger in terms of rejecting being around those types of people, or stop being in groups that make them feel this way. It's hard, right? If it was easy, we would have done. I mean, we would have eradicated mean girls and toxicity generations ago. Instead, we're generations into the same kind of behavior. But I really, it's kind of like. It's like a call to action, and that's what I'm pushing for. And with examples of people who did it and went through the hard parts and came out better on the other side. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it's necessary.
What do you want women to do? Like, what do you want women to do for themselves? And what do you want us to do for our girls? How do we protect them? In the clinic, day in and day out, we see teenage girls suffering from anxiety and depression. I've told you I've had a front row seat to this. And again, I don't want to, divulge too much to protect her privacy, but it is an issue in our home.
Yeah.
I know a lot. I have a lot of resources and I feel completely helpless. What can we do? As mothers, as women, what is it? What is your call to action for people like us who are truly struggling to prop their daughters up when everything is on display, right? It makes my blood boil a little bit, honestly. It's like I'll go to something and it's like hugs and kisses. Oh my God, you're so cute. You're so pretty. You're so this. Oh my God, you're gorgeous. You look so great. Blah, 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 blah. You go home. You're not invited to the dance. You're not invited to this. You're not invited to that. But guess what? In today's age, you can open up social media and you can see everybody having a really great time on Snap or Instagram or wherever you want to go. Yeah. So that social rejection that somebody experiences day in and day out is causing a mental health crisis, you know? So what are we all supposed to do? Both as mothers, both as girls, what do you want people to do?
Well, you have to clean up those relationships in your own life first, right?
Wow.
You really do. And because our kids are watching and they're taking notes, mental notes. So it starts with us changing how our relationships and ridding ourselves of those toxic relationships, or categories, being honest about what they are and removing ourselves from. It doesn't mean you can't have coffee with some people or go to a cocktail party and chat, but it's how you participate in those relationships. And I'm not talking about just gossip. Women gossip is actually shown to be kind of like great for us to have a little gossip sesh and have a little fun. So I'm not saying that, but I'm saying when you see truly someone, a group of women excluding people, being so toxic that they're tearing other people down, and you participating in that, even your silence speaks volumes to your kid. So it starts with us looking in the mirror and changing the way we engage other women and then work with our daughters. So we lead by example, but then we also talk to them. I talked to a woman whose daughter was just had a complete breakdown. She was at a party with 15 girlfriends. I'm thinking no one has 15 girlfriends.
Right.
But she's at a party with 15 girlfriends and she's hanging out. And then all of a sudden she realized they've all left her. And she was just crying and so upset. And I was like, oh, well, those clearly aren't her friends. And then I talked to the mother a few days later and I was like, how's she doing? And she's like, oh, it's fine. You know what? Her closest friends in the group were like, oh, we hopped in an Uber and we forgot to text you. So everything's good. I was like, no.
Yeah.
It's not good. And you need to tell her what friendship looks like and that real friends don't abandon. I mean, that's like something I was told, like, and you don't.
Especially in today's world, it's safety in numbers,
And one person needs to stay, just one person needs to stay. But the girls came up with an excuse, and now her daughter's like, oh no, they're all good. And I'm like, that's a problem. We can't let her. We know we don't want our kids to hurt, but that's not all good. Friends don't just leave you. Right? There has to have been one or two people to stay behind. And that's what we have to teach our girls to look for. It's not about, you don't need 20 friends. You don't need 15 friends. You don't even need 6 friends. It's actually, research shows that the magic number is 2 friends.
That's good enough.
It's good enough.
Wow.
2 close friends that you can rely on, share with, open up to, be real around, not be, and we also want our daughters to know that they don't have to pretend to be something that they're not. And that, I see a lot of that, right? Our daughters are being performative and we're being performative, and it's exhausting, right?
I want to pause here because I see this pattern all the time. People are doing the research, they're listening to the podcast, they're trying to take better care of themselves, and they still feel so stuck, especially when it comes to their health, their hormones, their stress, and even taking care of their families. That's why I created The Circle. The Circle is my private membership where we go deeper into these topics with real guidance, demos, live sessions, and a supportive community. If you want to try it, there's a 1-month trial available right now. You can learn more at wholeplus.co/circle. That's HOLPLUS.co/circle, or just click the link in the description below and use the code YouTube. Now let's continue the conversation. Do you feel like, I have a son and a daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and, my daughter's the one who's been very vulnerable to all of this. My son has not. What can I continue to model for my daughter as now she moves into college and she has to make a whole new set of friends and navigate friend groups and stuff like that? Are there things that I should be preparing her for as she enters a new chapter of her life? Like, what are things that as a mother I can do?
Right. I think that she or every kid entering like a new part of their emerging adulthood have to know that you may not find your people right away. Like we're all so anxious.
I know.
Find everyone right away, to have our best friends right away. It could take months. It could take till your sophomore year. But you also have to extend yourself to try people out, right? You can join a club, I don't know, mock trial, the Young Democrats, the Young Republicans, whatever it is.
Right.
And then test the people out. See if there's someone that resonates with you. See if there's someone that you can develop a connection with. And it's not like right away you're going to realize there's going to be fireworks. You're going to realize this is your like best friend for life. But it could be after, several meetings or going out for coffee or having lunch with the person. Or it's a process. And I think we need, there's so much need for immediate gratification for our kids and us, where finding true connection is a process. It's kind of like dating, right? I mean, most of us wouldn't marry someone we met a week ago, right? And be like, he's the love of my life,
right?
I think the same thing. I think the same thing goes for friendship, and keep an eye on how that person behaves, how they treat you, how they treat others. If you're, let's say, and this is, I think, a big warning sign. If you're a group of 3, and when the third person leaves, the other friend starts talking about them or saying nasty things about them, you have to think, well, when you're not there, that person's saying the same thing about you or doing the same thing to you. Are you okay with that? If you're okay with it, fine. Some people are fine with it. But if you're not, if it makes you anxious, I remember being in college and seeing that happen. I thought, oh my God, like if I get up and leave, they're going to talk about me too. And I didn't want that anxiety. And I was like, okay, these aren't my people.
Yeah. Right? I think that anxiety is probably one of the biggest, I'm thinking about people walking into situations kind of blindly. You never know who you're going to meet or who you're going to connect with. But that feeling, I think, is the barometer, right? Yep. I feel good when I'm here. I feel drained when I'm here. I feel happy when I'm here. I feel anxious when I'm here. Like I have, some friends, and I call them soul friends, right? Like I could not have talked to them for 3 months, but we'll go for a walk. We'll meet for coffee. They're out of town. They may text or call me, and you instantly feel like completely fill back up. You know? Like you have an energy source that nothing else could give you, right? But then I've also been in those situations where you go somewhere and you sit through a dinner, and this happened a lot, in the years past, but like you sit through a dinner and you're like, I don't feel good. Yeah. And I can't, and you sound irrational. Like I remember going home and telling my husband, I don't feel good. Like something's off. Like, and they're like, I think you're just blowing this out of proportion. But I think one of the things both of us want to really impress upon women is that intuitive knowledge, that like brain that's telling you that, please listen to that. Because if you don't feel good after a certain situation, there's 100% a reason for all of that. And the other thing I loved, and I want to make sure everybody really grasps that, when you're walking into these situations, some of the behaviors that you should be on guard for are I'm going to let you say them. Like, what are some of the key behaviors in these toxic groups that you should really be on alert so you can extricate yourself quickly? It's almost like being on a bad date and you're like, okay, I got to go, but like, what are some of the situations where maybe after a meeting or two, to get out of there very quickly?
Yeah. Well, I do. I 100% believe that you feel it here and in your stomach. I can feel it in my chest and in my stomach when something's just not right. And you do have to pay attention to that. But I think that you have to give someone a chance, right? I don't believe in just one impression and then you're like, oh, this person like is terrible. I've had an instance where, I was making a new mom friend.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, she's not so bad. No, this isn't, she's kind of funny. And by the third coffee,
it came out.
I was like, this isn't my person.
Right.
This isn't for me. And it was because she had no empathy for other people. And so you have to teach your daughter or son, but we're most likely about daughters here, what is important to you, right? And for me, I was like, oh my God, like the story is terrible. It's not funny. And it's, oh my goodness, if this happened to my child, I'd be so upset. Like, and the way this person was talking about this other mom and daughter. And I thought, okay, this isn't my person. For me, empathy is important. And also just understanding that people have different experiences in different lives and make different choices. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But that's for me. For some people, it's like, I want someone who can be like lighthearted and isn't talking about politics and the end of the world all the time.
Right.
So it really does, you have to create your own, what's important to you. And I think we can help our kids do that. Like I even tell my boys, I'm like, do you have fun with them? Are they nice to you?
Yeah.
Do do they make you laugh? Like those kinds of things are important. I don't want them feeling they have to be someone that they are not. And, I have one kid who is type A and like kind of wild and the other one who's kind of quiet and bookish. And I, the older one, he's like not a hard partier. And I'm like, it's fine.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to all the parties that your friends want to go to, where he was feeling all this pressure, even though he was not having fun and it wasn't
his thing.
It wasn't his thing. And I think our kids can feel this pressure, but we have to also tell them, oh, it's totally fine. Yeah. Like there are lots of people who don't like to do that.
So really modeling those behaviors.
Modeling, but also asking them how they feel and validating how they feel. And sometimes I find with parents, especially as our kids get older, we have this idea of who they should be and what fun is. And then we try to push them toward that.
Yeah.
Like the moms who want their kids to be in the popular group
right.
or with the certain girls or whatever. And so we're kind of pushing them in this direction because we think that means success. That means they're going to be happy. And that's not true for every kid. And so we have to pay attention to who our kids are, what our family values are, and help instill that in our kids.
Definitely. And I would add like that community group impacts the health of the family, right? Because, if the mom's having an issue, if the child's having an issue, then the entire family dynamic can be disrupted. And things like vacations can be not fun because somebody's always talking about somebody else or worried about what somebody else's, all of that. Yeah. So it definitely comes in. One of the things we didn't touch upon, and I think this has happened to me as well, is that we can have friends at a stage of our life. But then because people grow and change and evolve into different beings, sometimes that turns into, it turns into a toxic friendship.
Oh, yeah.
How do we navigate that situation?
So I think we have to understand that sometimes we meet people at a certain point in our lives, and that's what we needed at that point, right? Especially if you're a new mom and you're tired and you're drained, and you want people to relate to that. But then as your kids get older, you may have different needs. You may have different points of connection. And I think that I really want women to know that just because their kids are friends with another child doesn't mean you have to be best friends with that mom. And women run into a lot of trouble when they create all of their friendships based on who their kid plays with. And we've all done it. We've all done it. And so I think that we have to understand that you have to have your own independent point of connection and not reliant on like who your kid plays with, because I've seen so many women who are just devastated because when the girls start fighting or they're not friends, and all of a sudden this mom's on the outs and that one's talking about her to other moms, and it's based on the kid drama. And and I remember sitting with two moms who were going through this, and the reason that the drama started was so crazy to me. But I was just thinking, like, you can't put all your eggs in one basket. You can't rely just on these connections from school. I said, we have work friends. We can make connections at work. Having coffee with your coworker builds connection.
Yeah.
Right. And that's someone that you can probably talk about if they don't have kids, or if they do kids, maybe you don't have to talk about like what college your kid's going to, or what, like, how your kid's doing on the soccer team or whatever. We need different points of connection at different points in our lives, and not reliant on this one group forever. It's just not.
It's just not realistic.
It's not realistic.
I think that's the biggest message. And I wish I had jumped into that earlier, is really, diversifying our friend groups. But I think I too was suffering from fatigue and exhaustion, and also thinking in this very type A mentality that it's all or nothing. Like, either we're doing the big event, doing the big dinner, and I'm having people over and I'm making 20 dishes and everything's beautiful, or I'm doing nothing, And I think that kind of thinking is a fallacy when it comes to relationships and friendships, for sure. And I think it can get you stuck, in certain patterns. So I can look back and see myself doing that. Now, you've written a book. Tell us about your book, exploring this, what we can find in your book, and what you want people to walk away with.
Yeah, well, so I wrote this book, How to Have a Kid in Life, a Survival Guide, because it addressed all the things that I needed and I didn't find when I was a new mom. And what I found, there's certain things that, when you get pregnant, all of your friends are like, oh, you need this stuff. We're going to throw you a shower. And there's all this, like, it's all about these, like, things that they think you need to take care of a baby or new motherhood. Yeah. But there are all these emotional things that we go through. And so I found new motherhood really hard. I was a full-time working mom. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed. And I remember thinking, like, how do people keep doing this? How do people have 5 kids? This is insane. I'm going crazy. And so I started doing research and started talking to women across the country about their experiences. And so the book is filled with everything women told me, hundreds of women, what they told me that they struggled with the most, what they wish they could change, and how to fix it, right? Mm-hmm. So, you have things, there's a whole chapter on what happens to your career. A lot of people think that maternity leave keeps them safe. Yeah. That is not necessarily true. There are... Meaning you can be laid off or fired on maternity leave. Right. And so I think that most women I talk to, they feel like they have this job security when you're pregnant because you're protected. Yeah. That's not necessarily the case. Yeah. And so I go talk to legal experts about how you can safeguard yourself, or what to do if this happens to you, or what the warning signs are if you're being pushed out after you have kids. Mm-hmm. I talk about what happens to your romantic relationships. Right. People think that, when you have kids, you're never going to be more in love with your spouse, right? Or your partner. And it's just kind of like, you might hate them more than you ever thought possible when you have a new baby. Yep. Mm-hmm. What happens to your body image? There's a chapter on women and mothers and alcohol and addiction. And that's something that no one talked about. But it was, when I wrote the book, a growing problem. Like, a lot of facilities are seeing an uptick in new moms needing substance abuse counseling. And
it's just the stress and the anxiety and looking for an outlet for all of this. Yeah.
And I think the bottom line was that I found that, if women want to build strong, happy lives, but they can't do that if they neglect their self and their needs. And that is the ultimate message in the book. And I even have, once a year to do a check-in with yourself, and I have a series of questions you should ask yourself to know if you're, like, on the right track to keep yourself emotionally healthy and emotionally grounded. And I feel like it's really important, because the world tells us that when we're mothers, it's not about us at all. Right? It's about taking care of your baby and everyone else in your life. But I found that women were really struggling trying to keep up with that model of how to be an adult woman with children. So, I wanted to provide this so if your friends aren't going to tell you all the hard stuff about parenting, I was like, you can give this at their baby shower, and it's not you,
Yeah.
But it's also, there's a lot of positives. It's like, here's how to work through it. I even have a section on, so many women told me about one of the biggest arguments that they had with their partner was where to spend the holidays. So I
Right.
had kids,
Right.
how to discipline, and sleepovers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came up with a list of questions that women had told me they wish they had talked about before they had kids.
Yeah.
And these are just discussions you can have because sometimes you're blindsided, but you're like,
Right.
you don't spank, I believe in spanking, or vice versa, or you don't believe in, punishment, or you want to spend every Christmas with your mother because Christmas is special for her.
Right.
All of these things
Are things to navigate.
are things to navigate, and they're not impossible hurdles. They just have to be addressed.
Yeah.
And that's why I wrote it. And I love talking to women about their lives and what's going on with them because, we run the world, but sometimes we forget to check in on ourselves.
I wish almost there was like an objective accountability team for every new mom. You know what I mean? Like I don't know who would be on that team, but maybe it's a family member, it's a professional of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
And they're almost like picking at you with like, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Like where are you and where have you sacrificed maybe a little bit too much and compromised too much in all the different scenarios that you're in as a mom, But
Well, in some countries, that's a part of a benefit for new mothers. They get a mom group of different mothers who come together, and whether it's once a week or every other week, where they can point of connection and there's somewhat a facilitator checking in. Now, we don't do that. We don't even have paid maternity leave.
Right.
Right. But I think that you're right. I wish there was this built-in support. And, we have to find it. We have to find our village.
Yeah.
We also have to be picky about who's in that
enters
village.
that village.
Yeah.
And don't make decisions out of fatigue or insecurity or
Well, you're going to make those decisions out of fatigue and insecurity at first.
Yeah, but
then
be aware of when to get out.
Yes, but
be aware of the exit.
of how you feel, how those friends treat other people. Do they have the same morals and values that you want for your family and for yourself? Like, those aren't silly questions. That's real.
And then the exit plan. I'm curious what you have to say here. Is that cold turkey? We're done, or is that a conversation, or is that
Now, it depends on the scenario because there's so many different scenarios. I like the quiet exit where you just kind of like don't hang out as often and you can come up with the excuse. We withdraw a little bit, like, oh, I'm so busy or work ramped up or I have to take care of my mother-in-law, whatever it is.
Yeah.
The quiet exit is like a safer exit, but it could be a situation, and I've had this, where sometimes the behavior was so egregious that I thought, I'm going to say something. And I haven't regretted it.
Yeah.
And I moved on. And I think that, again, there's no one's going to change if there's no consequence for the behavior.
Yeah. And
I think that's a really important step in helping reduce the level of toxicity or mean girl behavior in our culture.
Yeah.
And you may not change that person, but you can change your circumstance and you can find different friends and you can find different support. And that goes for adult women and it goes for girls. It goes for college students all through your life. You can find like-minded people. You just have to be willing to take the step.
Well, I wish I had this book when I was going through the throes of new motherhood and navigating everything with my daughter and all the things. I have a lot of wisdom now, but I just feel like, I wish I had this from the get-go.
And sharing it. That's like the most important thing. That's what I love having these conversations, because if we don't talk about them, people really do feel that they're alone.
Yeah.
They feel like they're struggling with this and no one's going to get them.
Very much. And and I already said this, but there were many days that I thought it was me. I thought I was crazy. I thought I was not good enough.
Exactly.
I mean, all those negative thoughts, right, from wherever they're coming from, I always blame myself before I was like, no, this is ridiculous, So I hope this book helps women everywhere at whatever stage of motherhood they're in and whatever groups they're in. I think it's definitely a need. And I think it's going to be my new baby shower gift for everybody. How's that?
That's amazing.
So I love that. Well, final question before we let you go. Actually, two questions. Where can we find your book? Where can people find you if they want to reach out to you? And then what makes you whole?
We can find the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, pretty much wherever books are sold. And then you can reach out to me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. I actually do respond, especially if a mom has a question about something that they're going through. I've even come to like mom groups. Like they'll be like, can you come and talk to our mom group? But if I can get there, I can do it, or I can Zoom, which is now how we do so much of everything these days. Because I really feel like conversations are the best way to heal what women are going through, and honest. I'm super honest, so be prepared for
Love it.
total honesty. And what keeps me whole? You know, at different points in my life, it was different things. In my 20s, it was my career. I thought, oh, this is who I am.
Yeah.
Right. And then once I had a family, I think it's like you want your kids to be happy.
Yeah.
They always say you're only as happy as your unhappiest child.
Yeah.
So when my kids are doing well and they are happy, that helps complete me. But I have a pie chart of completion. There's my kids, there's my romantic relationship with my spouse, and then there's things that I do that are just for me. And for me, my career is just for me because I crafted a career that I love. So when that pie chart is when those things are each doing well, I feel complete. But in real life, there's something's always struggling a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
Something's always
nature
something's always struggling a little bit. But it's me taking a holistic look at my world, and am I working hard to make all of those sections be the best that they can be? That really does complete me. It's work.
I love that. I love that. You took a little spin on the word whole plus, and basically you approach your identities and roles holistically.
Yeah.
I love that. And that makes you whole. I love that explanation. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been so incredibly helpful. I hope people will take your advice and all of the research that you've done and be able to move forward in a really healthy way. So thank you. That community body is important. Our community health is important. It plays into the numbers that we see in our exam room. So it's all connected.
And you're not alone.
And you're definitely not alone. So for everybody watching and listening to this episode, thank you again. We post new episodes every week, so don't forget to subscribe. Before you go, remember, healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments. If today's episode gave you one of those moments, subscribe and keep learning with me. The next video is right here, and it picks up right where this one left off.